You know those electrical patterns that are always buzzing around in our heads? Turns out it's not just random noise. Each and every single frequency of those brainwaves actually plays a really important role in how we think, how we feel and learn. And guess what? We have a special guest today who knows a ton about this. This is Jeremiah Klein. He's a homeschooler. And get this, he actually researched brainwaves for his science fair project. So welcome, Jeremiah.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to talk about brainwaves. Most people don't realize how cool they really are.
I bet. So before we get into all the really fascinating details, can you just remind our listeners what exactly brainwaves are?
Sure, brainwaves are these super tiny electrical signals that our brain uses to talk to each other, and we can actually measure them using a special machine called an EEG. And these brainwaves show different patterns based on what we're doing, like if we're sleeping or focusing or like daydreaming or something.
That's a great explanation. And this is where it gets really, really fascinating for all of us homeschooling folks out there. Because these different brainwave patterns, these frequencies, they really do impact how well our kids can learn and process information. It's almost like a secret code to unlock their full potential.
You know, it's interesting. We often hear about good brainwaves versus bad brainwaves, but that's not really accurate. It's more like thinking of it as an orchestra. Each instrument is a brainwave frequency and has a very specific role to play. So it's not so much about good versus bad. It's really about the harmony and the balance between them.
Oh, I love that analogy. So, Jeremiah, let's break down this brainwave orchestra. Can you walk us through the main types of brainwaves and tell us what they do?
Yeah, definitely. So we'll start with the highest frequency. These are gamma waves, and they're super important for learning and memory and processing quickly. So when our brains are humming along with lots of gamma activity, we're able to connect ideas and solve problems, like our brains are firing on all cylinders.
So that means that when our kids are, tackling a challenging math problem, it's those gamma waves that are helping them absorb all that knowledge.
One thing that I found really interesting while I was doing research was that people with learning challenges sometimes have lower gamma activity. And that doesn't mean that they can't learn, but it might explain, why certain subjects are just harder for them.
That's a really good point for all of us homeschool parents to keep in mind. It's not always about a lack of effort on our kids' part. Sometimes it's about understanding how their brains are wired a little bit differently and how we can find different strategies to support them.
Absolutely. And this is where recognizing that interplay between all the different brainwave frequencies is so important. Yeah, gamma waves are really essential for active learning. We also need other frequencies to help us focus and relax and consolidate everything that we've learned.
Okay, so let's move on to the next brainwave frequency in our orchestra. Jeremiah, tell us about beta waves.
All right, so beta waves are all about being alert and focused and ready to take action. They're the ones in charge when we're actively thinking, making decisions, or engaging in conversation. Basically, everything that we're doing in our waking hours.
So if our middle schoolers are working on a science experiment, or they're having a really lively debate about current events, their beta waves are probably in overdrive.
And while beta activity is great for keeping us motivated and productive, too much of it can lead to stress and anxiety. And it can even lead to problems with sleep. It's kind of like a car engine revving too high for too long. It needs to have some time to cool down and recharge.
That makes perfect sense. So Jeremiah, do you have any tips from your research on how we can help our homeschoolers manage those beta waves and avoid burnout?
One of the best things that you can do is to encourage regular breaks. Even just taking a few minutes to step away from the books or the computer can make a huge difference. Getting outside for some fresh air, listening to some calming music, they can all help to calm any racing beta waves.
Those are some really great suggestions. It's a good reminder for all of us that learning isn't just about, cramming in as much information as possible. It's also about creating a balanced environment where our kids can really thrive, both mentally and emotionally. Speaking of balance, let's move on to the next brainwave frequency in our orchestra. It's all about finding that sweet spot between focus and relaxation. Jeremiah, tell us about alpha waves.
So basically, alpha waves are like the bridge between our conscious and subconscious minds. They're active when we're relaxed, but still alert. Kind of like that peaceful state you feel when you're daydreaming or you're lost in a good book, like Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
So it's not just about, zoning out in front of the TV. Alpha waves actually have a real purpose.
Yeah, alpha waves are really important for creativity and problem solving. and even boosting our immune systems, which is crazy.
It's like our brains need that downtime to process information and make new connections. Sometimes the best ideas come to us when we're not actively trying to force them.
And what's fascinating is that alpha waves are also linked to something called flow state, which is that feeling of being completely absorbed in an activity. And you lose track of time. It's that magical zone where learning just becomes effortless and enjoyable.
Now, that sounds like something every homeschool parent dreams of. But seriously, how can we encourage more of that alpha wave activity in our homeschool?
Well, one simple but powerful technique is mindfulness. It could be something as basic as taking a few deep breaths before starting a new subject, or encouraging your kids to notice the sights and the sounds and the sensations around them. Even just a few minutes of focused attention can really help to shift their brainwave patterns toward a more relaxed and receptive state for learning.
Mindfulness. It's one of those buzzwords that we hear all the time. But I'm really starting to understand why it's so important. It's not just about being zen all the time. It's about giving our brains the space that they need to function at their best.
Exactly. And remember, all of these brainwave frequencies, they don't operate in isolation. They're constantly interacting and influencing each other. So by understanding how to encourage specific brainwave patterns, we can also help our kids transition more smoothly between all the different states of learning and optimize their overall cognitive function.
Okay, so we've covered gamma, we've covered beta, we've covered alpha. But what about those times when our kids are completely zoned out, just lost in their own little world? Is there a brainwave frequency for that too?
You bet. That would be theta waves.
They're most active when we're daydreaming or sleeping, or deeply engrossed in something creative. It's that twilight zone between wakefulness and sleep, where our imaginations run wild, and our brains are free to make those out-of-the-box connections.
So when our kids are staring out the window, or they're doodling in their notebooks, or they're telling us these really elaborate stories about their imaginary friends, it's not necessarily a sign that they're not paying attention. They could actually be in a state of heightened creativity and learning.
This is where it's so important to recognize the value of unstructured playtime. Because sometimes the most profound learning actually happens when we're not actively trying to teach.
I love that reminder. So Jeremiah, tell us more about the benefits of these theta waves and how we can encourage them in a homeschool setting.
So theta waves, they're the secret ingredient for boosting creativity and intuition and emotional processing. They help us connect with our inner world, process emotions, and tap into our subconscious minds.
That sounds amazing, but how do we actually encourage theta wave activity in our homeschools? It's not like we can just tell our kids to go daydream for an hour.
Well, you're right. It's not about forcing it. It's about creating the conditions where those theta waves can naturally emerge. So things like imaginative play, storytelling, creative writing, art projects, or even just quiet time for reflection can all help to stimulate theta activity.
So it's really about finding that balance again between structured learning and unstructured exploration, and trusting that our kids are learning, even when they're not sitting at a desk with a textbook.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that learning is a holistic process that involves our entire being, our thoughts and emotions and our bodies and our spirits. And I think brainwave patterns just provide this fascinating window into how this process unfolds.
Okay, so we've covered 4 of the main brainwave frequencies: gamma, beta, alpha, and theta, but there's one more. The slowest of them all, that plays a crucial role in our overall well-being. Jeremiah, tell us about delta waves.
So yeah, delta waves. They're the slowest and deepest brain waves, and they're most active when we're in a state of deep, dreamless sleep. They're really essential for restoring our bodies and minds, boosting our immune systems, and consolidating memories. So think of them kind of like the cleanup crew that comes in after a long day and gets everything ready for the next one.
So it's not just about, getting enough sleep. It's about getting the right kind of sleep, the kind that allows those delta waves to work their magic.
Absolutely. And this is where establishing a consistent bedtime routine and creating a calm and comfortable sleep environment and limiting screen time before bed become especially important, because we need to give those delta waves the space they need to do their job, which is to recharge our batteries and prepare us for another day of learning.
That's a great point. It's a good reminder that sleep isn't a luxury. It's a necessity for optimal brain function. So Jeremiah, do you have any tips from your research on how we can help our homeschoolers get that deep restorative delta sleep that they need?
One thing that I hate to admit is that a regular sleep schedule can really help, even on the weekends, so that our bodies can get used to a predictable sleep-wake cycle. I might have to take my own advice on that one. Also, make sure that their bedrooms are dark and quiet and cool. Personally, I like my room freezing at night. And encourage them to unwind with calming music before bed. That always helps me personally.
Those are all fantastic tips, and it's a good reminder that creating a healthy sleep environment is really an investment in our kids' overall well-being. So we've covered a lot of ground. In this Brainwave deep dive, we've explored the 5 main frequencies: gamma, beta, alpha, theta, and delta, and we've learned how each one plays a really unique and essential role in how we think and learn and feel. I think the most important takeaway is that we have this remarkable ability to influence our own brainwave patterns, and in turn, our thoughts and our emotions and our behaviors. By understanding how our brains work, we can become more conscious of our own learning experiences. And for homeschooling families, this is an incredibly empowering concept. It means that we have the power to shape our children's learning environments in ways that support their unique brain needs and help them to thrive. So don't be afraid to experiment, get creative, and trust your instincts. Your children's brains are capable of amazing things. And by understanding how to optimize their brainwave activity, you can unlock their full potential.
That's a beautiful and inspiring message to end on. This has been such an enlightening conversation. Jeremiah, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your passion with us. You are a true Brainwave ambassador.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It was so fun talking to you guys. There's so much more that we could talk about, but I gotta go.
It's been a pleasure having you, Jeremiah. You're a shining example.
And to our listeners, we hope this deep dive into brainwaves has sparked your own curiosity and empowered you with new tools. Remember, every child's brain is unique and amazing, and by understanding how their brains work, we can unlock their full potential and help them to truly thrive.